What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Week 15 DFS MVP podcast. I'm your host, TJ Hernandez, the director of DFS at 4for4.com. As always, with Mr. John Daigle, my trusty co-host on basically our second Thanksgiving week of the year. We got a 3-game slate on Saturday. So how you feeling this week?
Fun 3-game slate as well. Also for the live people, I am using Chris Allen's
Yeah, let's not
background
bury the lead, right?
and setup here because I'm in Ohio for poker night. We're going to catch up with him, Justin Edwards, Drew Davenport, some others from 4for4 and around the industry. Very excited, but also I don't like it's basically a studio or command center he has set up here, and I'm going to constantly be looking at the wrong camera. There's so much going on over here. So good luck
That's
to
right.
me. The live crowd is going to be in store for a show here, but yes, excited for the 3-gamer to talk it at the top and excited for Sunday as well.
Let's just get that overrated Pliny the Elder bottle out of frame, and we will pull some of those whiskeys up, and then we'll be all good to go.
There's a lot going on here.
Before we get into the Saturday slate discussion, just a reminder to everybody that DFS pricing is down to $24 for the rest of the year. We go through Super Bowl with our content and projections. Plenty of time, 2 full months of DFS still to go. So lots of value on that $24. Make sure you get signed up for that. Go over to the plans page at 4for4. Everything is discounted down to $24. Daigle, before we hop into our usual decision point of the week, let's talk a little bit about the Saturday slate. Just touch on it. Obviously, these 3-game slates are always a little bit tricky just because, pretty much anybody that's playing significant snaps is in play. I did a big write-up this week on the slate, and the intro just talks about the different approaches you take to smaller slates. It's not just a value-based slate because you can kind of fit everybody into the slate. It's more building around narratives, building around game scripts. So we have 3 very distinct games. We have a game that is expected to be a shootout early in Minnesota, and that makes the slate interesting because a lot of the chalk will be early in Minnesota, with Minnesota and Indy. Second game looks like it should be a dud with Cleveland and Baltimore. Not a lot of scoring expected there. Some value on the Cleveland side. Not a lot of people are going to be touching Baltimore. And then the late game should be a fireworks game, but lake effect snow warnings over there. So that's going to throw a huge wrench in things. Usually snow isn't a huge concern for offense, but it sounds like this one is going to be pretty brutal with some wind, so it should have an effect. So what are your just kind of general thoughts on the slate and how you're thinking about approaching the 3-gamer?
I, like everyone else, do enjoy the Colts Vikings game the most. I know where everyone's head is already at, and that's thinking about how sneaky is Dolphins Bills going to be with the weather.
Yeah.
And we have seen the total start at 48, get decreased to 42, already been bet back up to 44 now. I do wonder if it's whale money. I wonder if it's money that matters. And my whole point is not even about the weather. It's just about how poor to expectations these two offenses were performing anyhow coming into this game. I expected it to be under anyways before weather became a factor. Just Tua alone having completed only 46% of his passes the past 2 games and tougher matchups against the Chargers and 49ers, whereas he obviously went nuclear and did what every quarterback does. It seems to just be schedule purposes against the Lions, Texans, Bears and Titans, I think it was. But that 4-game stretch really just all about schedule. And so, and plus, not to mention Josh Allen, only 7 passing touchdowns. There's so much going on here. My head is going to blow. Josh Allen, only 7 passing touchdowns total since week 9, 6.5 yards per attempt, not scaring you through the air at all. And that was my point really. And so I think about the running game more for Miami more than anything. I don't think Jeff Wilson is going to play. Even if he does, I wonder how limited he'll be. So I think sneaking Raheem Mostert in when it's really a slate with only 3 expensive running backs everyone's trying to get to. And I don't even care about Nick Chubb, given how poor the Browns running game has been without their starting center the past few weeks. So I look to that. And more importantly, Vikings Colts is fun, not just because of the Vikings side of the ball. And that's what everyone cites, but it's the fact this Vikings defense, we talk about it weekly, is horrible. And you can say Matt Ryan washed up has looked bad recently, but then also note that Ryan played the Cowboys, Steelers, and Eagles in his last 3 games. 3 daunting pass rushes. Whereas in earlier matchups, softest matchups of the year, which this is against the Titans, Jaguars, and Texans, Ryan went over 350 in all 3 of those games. So I think Ryan does have the ceiling to win this slate outright, and double stacks with the Colts are live, which makes me on top of that game in an onslaught game stock. More importantly, emphasizing that more than anything else here.
Yeah, I think if you go to my article on 4for4, all of the ownership projections and the leverage scores are at the bottom of the page, but this game is going to be very heavily owned. I think the way that we're approaching this slate is just are you onslaughting early or not? And if you're going to onslaught early, I think go all in with the onslaught. Don't alligator arm it. I'm talking 6, 7 players. I think they allow 7 players from the same game in the onslaught. And get a couple unique pieces in there. I think my favorite early unique pieces are KJ Osborne and Alec Pierce. I think Alec Pierce could get loose against that Viking secondary that, they really give it up in chunks. And I agree with you. I think you can be contrarian by onslaughting it, but onslaughting it with Matt Ryan. If you don't onslaught the game, I think we're kind of just looking at a balanced build. I don't think that even if that early game goes under, just the other 2 games have so many concerns that you mentioned. I think balanced builds make sense. I don't think onslaught in another game makes a ton of sense, especially the middle game. That game is just gross. Although I do think that we do have a couple interesting contrarian pieces in that game. I think you could play Tyler Huntley naked, hope that he gets all the rushing. We're not going to get a lot of scoring in that game, but if he gets you just whatever modest passing he's going to give you, and then 80 on the ground and a touchdown, and you could get an extra stud in your skill positions that other people don't have because you're playing Huntley, especially on DK. I think that makes it interesting. And then if you are just looking for a cheap touchdown, hope if the running backs don't go off, the 3 that you talked about, then a touchdown from a third running back can make the difference. And people are going to play J.K. Dobbins because he scored last week, but him and Gus Edwards had almost the exact same workload last week. So I think if you need a really contrarian piece, I think Gus Edwards is an option there. And then the late game, I mean, Josh Allen stacks are going to be fine. Josh Allen is going to get some with his legs. The wind and the snow is going to impact the game in such that I think it's going to keep me from Josh Allen triples and stuff like that. I think Josh Allen singles are still going to be fine to get other studs in the early game. I think you can play pass catchers in this game. Again, I just don't think we're playing multiple pass catchers from the same team in this game. I think you could play a traditional like we do on the full slates. A Josh Allen single with a bring back, I think, is okay, even with the conditions. There's still going to be enough to go around for one of the pass catchers to get there. Raheem Mostert is going to be one of the most popular values on the slate, so there's opportunities there. Devin Singletary and James Cook are going to cut into each other's ownership a little bit, but if one gets steamed, it's going to be Cook. So there's some leverage opportunity with Singletary as well.
Well put. I also like Mark Andrews and skinny stacks with the Browns. Ravens over the last month quietly allowing a league high completion rate on throws 20 yards downfield. And, Watson has thrown 5 times downfield and he's been bad. He's only completed 1 of them, but all 5 of those targets have gone to Donovan Peoples-Jones, only 1 player. So I think skinny stacks with either Donovan Peoples-Jones or Amari Cooper. Not sure how many people want to play him. And again, Andrews hasn't gone over 70 yards or caught a touchdown since week 7. Not sure how many people want to play him either, even though it's an ugly slate, even though, everyone got excited about him with Tyler Huntley last week. If you're not going to get excited about him in a skinny stack or on a 3-game slate, then I don't know what to tell you. So it just seems like a good bounce back opportunity there. But yes, I'll be avoiding that game like a lot of people are mostly. I also know I want my exposure in one way or the other in the Bills-Dolphins game, even more the Browns-Ravens game, my defense exposure. And so I have to think about what direction, but Josh Allen, 30 points doesn't kill you in this slate, in my opinion. I think Kirk Cousins or Matt Ryan can match that. The 40 burger will kill you. You will win the slate if that's the case.
Yeah, I agree. Head on over to 4for4, check out the breakdown. Every angle is covered in there. And we'll be running back again next week on Christmas. We have the 3-game slate is on Sunday. So we'll be doing that again next week. But let's hop into the main slate on week 15. As we always do, start with the decision point of the week. I do think it's one of the most unique slates of the week because, especially on DK, we have a lot of punt options, which we haven't had all year. But what is the thing that you're hanging your hat on, or that is just shifting how you're thinking about the slate this week?
That's interesting you say that because I don't see many punt options. So I'm excited to talk with you about a couple. But for me, it is the fact that I genuinely think there are only two like combative games that we're going to discuss on this slate,
Yeah.
like games that may push each other, and the Titans,
Mhm.
Chargers, and Jaguars, Cowboys. And I
Yeah.
don't know ownership just yet. We're recording on Friday afternoon. I'm trying to see where everyone's going to come in because if we are too excited about the Jaguars and thus ignoring the Cowboys, or we don't think the Jaguars can hang and thus ignoring the Cowboys, that's kind of the area I want to live at
Mhm.
since Derrick Henry and the Titans can slow this game down for the Chargers. Like I talked about this with Sharp Clark on the video on our YouTube page, which everyone should go watch. And he even mentioned that, yeah, like Derrick Henry's ceiling game, he believes, even in the betting streets, like that leans towards the under, and thus Justin Herbert in the passing game not hitting their ceiling. Since we've seen Derrick Henry average, Derrick Henry's one of my plays this week. I'll save it for then. But overall, yeah,
Sure.
I think there are two games on this slate I'm excited about. And so I'm curious if you are seeing ownership right now condensed to those two games. Because if so, I need to think about where else to look. Or do you think it's going to be spread out, given that people may want to play the Eagles in a blowout and the Texans in a blowout?
Another reason I think this is one of the most unique slates of the week is because I do think ownership is going to be very flat across the board.
Okay.
I don't think we might not get a 30% guy on the slate. And even though those games are, those two games I do agree are going to be the ones that we want to target. I think we have a lot of standalone values, which we'll get into as we go through the podcast, that are going to take ownership from other spots, whether it be like an Alvin Kamara or cheap wide receivers. Obviously, the Chiefs and the Eagles are in good blow up spots, but also blowout spots.
Mm-hmm.
Chiefs are just always weird. They're just never going to get a ton of ownership outside of Kelce, just because it's hard to pin down who does what there. And then the Eagles, I think, will get moderate ownership. They're not going to be crazy, but they're all kind of in the price ranges where they will take away from Cowboys and Jaguars players. And with the Cowboys and Jags, like, we don't have like a clear slam dunk value in that game, and we also don't have like a guy that just dominate touches. We have a backfield share in Dallas. Zay Jones is cheapish, but Dallas has tons of options. We've seen Jacksonville use a lot of weapons a lot of different ways, so they all kind of eat into each other's ownership. The point is, I think you can just kind of plant your flags this week, and if you do like a game, go all in on it, and it's probably going to be unique. Yeah,
that makes me feel amazing because, well, we'll get to Dak here in a second.
Yeah, the thing that I'm really looking at this week, and especially on DraftKings on FanDuel, running backs just dominated the flex. Although the last couple of weeks we've seen wide receiver in the flex, I just think you can't do it as often as you can on DraftKings. I don't think people on DraftKings really pay enough attention to not only just like what they're doing in the flex, but what looks optimal that week and what the field is going to be doing. And it's one of my favorite thing about doing our ownership projections at 4for4 is that it really does give me a pretty good primer on how the field is going to use the flex. And I think this week is setting up as a 3 running back week. I think that's probably going to be optimal from a value perspective, especially if Ramondre Stevenson plays, because there are guys that are affordable. I think there are pay down options at wide receiver that let you get in 3 viable running backs. And I have one of the highest cumulative projections on running backs that I've had all year. So that's not to say that you shouldn't be playing wide receivers. I just think when you're building, you should be cognizant that whereas usually 30% of lineups flex a running back, I think this week it could be 50 to 60. So just think about that when you're building your lineups. You're muted, Daigle.
Gosh, there's so many mice over here. And of course, for Saturday, remember flex option app for the Ravens, Browns, and Bills, Miami. like make sure it's in the flex. Don't go putting
Yes.
having another like Tyreek Hill in the waiting with a 9K salary and then have a Colts or Vikings player in your flex. Do not be that person.
Yeah, definitely do that. Be paying a lot of attention to late swap on Saturdays, and where the field is usually especially on DK, actually on both sides, the field tends to flex tight end more than they should. On these shorter slates, it's actually a lot more viable. I think at least. So I think some extra flex tight end field.
I also forgot to mention you can definitely play Jonathan Taylor with Matt Ryan. You can definitely stack them together, especially in a short slate.
Absolutely. Let's get into our favorite, most successful segment of the week, the Underdog card builder.
Did we bounced back last week? I didn't even go back.
No, we got screwed by old Andrews last week. But we're just, you know what, we're gonna the plan of action to close out the year. Our betting guys crush it. Our betting subs have crushing it all year, and they're posting props every week. So we're gonna just start tailing them, and we're gonna push you guys to those articles because they crush it. And
push everyone to the 4 betting Discord too, because that's where these picks are coming from, literally.
Absolutely. So let's hop into it. Let's throw that up on the screen. Remember, if you see at top, we got a booster this week. Jalen Hurts over half of a completion. So make sure you throw that into your cards before you start, because it's free money if you hit. And hopefully you guys are all going to get some free money from these 2 picks today. I have 2 fired up from Connor and Ryan's articles, but do you have anything you want to look at before we fire these?
No, and I would just say, as it pertains to the slate as well, we're not going to talk about Jalen Hurts, but if you think it's very narrative-y, there isn't metrics to back it up. But if you do think, like, given that if the Cowboys lose and the Eagles win, the Eagles coast the next 2 weeks. Like they're done. They lock up the number 1 seed. Mm-hmm. So if you think there's a chance that the Eagles and Sirianni think this is Jalen Hurts' MVP campaign game,
interesting.
He's the one who wins the slate. And unfortunately, again, although I can't quantify it, that's a metric that's sticking to the back of my brain. And it's just like, well, if they think that, man, like Jalen Hurts double stack, especially if we don't have Dallas Goedert and the target share stays concentrated, like it breaks Sunday for sure.
Yeah, that's a really interesting angle. Good call on that. I already like the Eagles, but that's really interesting. All right, I'll hop into Connor's top pick this week is Austin Eckler, under 42.5 rushing yards. Connor actually bet it on another book at 40.5 rushing yards. So we're actually getting a little bit of value on the under here. The Eckler's been doing a ton of damage to the air. The Chargers are already a pass-heavy offense. They're playing the Titans that are a pass funnel defense. It makes sense that if Eckler does his damage, it will be through the air this week. I still like Eckler, but I think under 42.5 rushing yards makes a lot of sense, especially because we are getting value on it compared to other books.
And I have him in my DFS tournament article, but I even noted in that article he's been under 50 yards in 7 of his last 8 games, but he's still the RB2 in points per game because of what he does through the air. So you can absolutely stack him as a standalone option. You can play him with Justin Herbert, but we are definitely not expecting rushing yards, especially again, the Titans haven't allowed anyone to go over 66 yards since week 1. Like they just stuff everyone.
Yeah, Eckler can get 25 rushing yards and still put up 25 DK points.
Absolutely.
Another one, we talked about the crazy weather expected in Buffalo. Josh Allen, always a threat to run. The over-under is at 47.5 rushing yards. As we talked about last week with Jalen Hurts, teams that play a lot of man and blitz a lot are teams that quarterbacks tend to have really good rushing games against, those mobile quarterbacks. Dolphins do that, and then obviously the weather is going to make it tougher to throw than usual. Gusts up to 30 miles per hour. Anything over 15 is where we really start paying attention, so double that. And Josh Allen should be getting it done on the ground. I mean, going back to that Saturday slate, I mean, I think I probably won't ever play Josh Allen naked just because, I mean, his, pairing him with Diggs, especially on a short slate, is so always going to be intriguing. Ancillary options are tough, but I mean, Josh could, like you said, 40 burger for Josh is very much in play this week.
As Mr. Scampers points out in the chat too, Mike Jasicki's line is at 1.5 yards since he hasn't reached 1 yard in 3 consecutive games. So it's a fair line.
Why did they franchise tagged him?
Yes. I will say though, for the short slate Saturday, remember, like Dalton Schultz, Durham Smythe, who's questionable, I believe, didn't play 2 games earlier this year, and those are the games that Jasicki ran around on 70% of dropbacks. That's when he became a fantasy asset in those 2 games. So if Durham Smythe is out Saturday night, I do think Jasicki's live.
Sweating
I
Durham
love
Smythe
short plays.
injury updates.
Love
What are we? $25 to win 150. We got that freebie on the Jalen Hurts, assuming that he plays a snap, which he very much should. Get that bet in if you're watching before they take these lines down, because we are line movers. Hopefully you guys are watching enough for us to be line movers. And if you're listening on the audio, we do post these on Twitter. Hopefully when you get the audio, these are still up, but better to be watching and get them as soon as possible. Go to 4for4.com/underdog or use the promo code 4for4 when you sign up for a new Underdog account. That'll get you a free DFS subscription at 4for4 and a 100% deposit match up to $100. Let's hop into the week and start with quarterbacks as we always do. Who you liking this week?
We talked about the Jaguars-Cowboys game, and I will be all over Dak Prescott. If you want to look at long-term for this Jaguars defense, since week 6, allowing 285 passing yards, 22 fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks per game. In that time, only Russell Wilson hasn't finished as a QB1 for fantasy against them. So I expect Dak to continue that trend. But even short-term, in the last month, Jacksonville permitting the 3rd highest rate of passing touchdowns, including a league-high 9 passing touchdowns inside the red zone, just falling apart all over. And, of course, this Dak Cowboys offense has averaged 35 points per game since he returned from injury. So I have question marks on the Jag side of the ball for sure against Dallas's defense, even though they are suffering an injury cluster in their secondary. Either way, though, I have no question marks about Dallas putting up 30 points. Their team totals at 26.5. Both myself and Ryan Noonan already bet over that. So, yes, I love this spot for Dak.
Yeah, I'm always pretty trepidatious to stack heavily on main slates, especially in like the larger field stuff. I just throw a couple million makers in just because I have to. But I think this is a week where you can stack this game pretty heavily. Like I think like Dak doubles with 2 bringbacks is in play this week. I really like this game a lot. I have more to say on it later, so I'll just leave it at that. But it is, until you threw that Jalen Hurts MVP talk at me, Dak was my favorite quarterback on the slate, but now I have to think it. But a team that is popping this week, and I kind of put this more because I want to talk to you about it more than I'm sure about it. But Mac Jones.
Yeah, I saw this on the notes, and I was like, I don't know what's happening in TJ's head right now, but I'd love to hear it.
It's only because let's go through like why he would be a good value this week. His salary is already low. Raiders are one of the worst defenses in the league. They're one of 3 teams that are bottom 10 in schedule adjusted points allowed to both running backs and quarterbacks. The Raiders face a top 10 passing rate over expectation. New England has been top 10 in pace over the last 6 weeks, which is pretty surprising, but the Raiders are bottom 3 in pace. We have Mac Jones projecting as a top 2 value on DraftKings at quarterback. And when I talked about like a lot of these pay down options, all of his pass catchers are cheap, so they're all popping in our projections too. I have moderate projections on them, but I think that I think across the industry, I think they might end up being somewhat popular just this passing game because the Raiders defense has been so bad. Mac Jones is in no way a cash game option. I think he can hit 3x salary or 4x salary or whatever, but I still don't know if that's enough to use him in tournaments. And I don't I really try not to disagree with the projections, but I don't love the fact that I think I can just kind of avoid this game altogether, at least the New England side, despite them all popping in our value scores this week. Well, what do you think? What do you make of the Patriots, especially if Ramondre doesn't play? What do you make of this passing attack?
And remember, it's not just Ramondre. I don't even know if Jacoby Myers practiced again this week. Did he get in a limited session on Friday? Because he was DNP still on Thursday. So, if we don't have Myers or Ramondre, I mean, what the hell is this offense? That's my question. So, I think I'd feel much more comfortable skinny stacking it Okay, we're hearing Derek Brown, of course, for our friend at Fantasy Pros, is in the chat.
Limited.
He's saying, yeah, he was limited on Friday, so maybe he plays. And honestly, that's the way I was looking at it because 4,700 on DraftKings for Jacoby, I am very interested in. No one's going to play him. But Mac, Jacoby, no Ramondre, I don't know, man. I don't know. I genuinely haven't thought on it.
If Ramondre plays, like Patriots could be because ownership is so flat this week. If Ramondre plays, the Patriots could be the most owned offense on the slate, which is crazy to think about. So I just wanted to bring them up because he is popping as a value, but I just think the ceiling of this offense is crazy limited, and he doesn't have the floor to play him in cash because he doesn't rush much, and I just don't think the offense has a ceiling to play him in tournaments, especially with the smash spots we have this week.
I mean, it's the same thing a lot of very sharp players did with Russell Wilson last week. If Jerry Jeudy was popping and Greg Dulcich was popping, it's like naturally then you get to Russell Wilson, the contrarian piece. And again, I know a couple like DFS pros that went to Russell Wilson because of that reason in small field tournaments. I think that's the case you're pretty much making for Mac. So, I mean, if someone just did it literally just last week, you can't say it's a bad idea. I just genuinely haven't thought about it much since everyone's been out at practice until Friday.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Ramondre. That's really going to swing things quite a bit. You briefly touched on this play at running back, but talk to me about Derrick Henry, because that's interesting what you said that you think that or on the podcast you guys talked about that a Henry stealing game might limit the upside of this game on the Chargers side.
Like last week, people don't know it when they look at the box score. They just think, oh, Henry was dominant throughout the game. That dude had 11 carries for 96 yards and a touchdown in the first quarter. It should have been a 400-yard game, but he gets scripted out. That's why he's averaged 22 fantasy points in wins and 12 points in losses. And so, like, if we do think he kind of hangs around this one, it probably is because they are slowing down or the Titans are dominating the game. That would have been my lean, which makes me want to skinny stack instead of play like a Justin Herbert double stack with Derrick Henry. You know, that can still be live since Trevor Lawrence with Derrick Henry was the slate winning stack in tournaments on DraftKings last week because of Lawrence's double stacking salary. But yeah, not only that, but of course, Chargers defense still the worst rushing defense in the league highs and yards per carry, 5.5, and yards after contact per attempt. So no matter what the situation, I'm still all over Derrick Henry this week and consider him just among the high priced options in this slate. Like, he's the one with the highest ceiling, in my opinion, by a wide margin.
Yeah, it's basically him and Jacobs, right? Those are the two. That's the
So we don't think Eckler can get their rushing, and then you go down beyond that. Pretty much, it's like Tony Pollard's next up, but at some point, that touchdown juice is going to wear out too.
Yeah, that's I like that a lot. And you like another side of this game, but we'll save that because I agree with that a lot too. But probably the most obvious value on the slate, especially on DraftKings, is Alvin Kamara, 7,600 FanDuel, 68 on DK at home, 4.5 points favorites against a very bad Atlanta defense. Atlanta's 20th in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs, but they also rank outside the top 20 against every other position. Now New Orleans doesn't come in there and chuck it all over the place. At least I don't think. Atlanta faces the highest rushing rate over expectation over the last 6 weeks. The problem, New Orleans is last in rush EPA and explosive rush rate in that time span. And Alvin Kamara's only seen over 15 touches once in the last 5 games. Now, Mark Ingram is out, but my question isn't whether we should be playing Kamara because he is a value. I think if he ends up crazy chalky, I think he's a pretty easy fade in GPPs and cash games. I think you have to play him. My question to you is, like, I have a really moderate ownership projection on Kamara right now because he is around some other guys like Pacheco, like Miles Sanders. I think people will play too, but I think I've seen some talk around the industry that Kamara is going to be crazy chalky. I mean, are people just going to say Ingram's out, so yeah, Kamara's a play, or are they going to say we don't play Saints and he's just going to end up at like 18% or something?
I figured he'd be quite high rostered as well.
Okay.
I could be wrong. You know, we don't move the needle. We should, but it's the ETR boys who move the needle. So I usually tune in, see like what suggestions they have, just because I know then those suggestions are going to get steamed. And so I'm still like you. I'm on the fence. I do want to play Kamara. And it's not just because, as you touched on, 85% of backfield touches in 4 games without Ingram this year compared to 71% of backfield touches in the other 7 games he played with Ingram. Like a massive difference for his touches. Not only that, but like this 5-game stretch, and maybe it's long enough to where recency bias does keep his ownership down, but this 5-game stretch has been against top half of the league defenses and schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs. Whereas you look at his 3 previous softest matches before that, it was against defenses in the lower half of the league, and that was the Seahawks game where he had 29 touches for 194 yards, Cardinals 18 for 105, and the Raiders game 27 for 158 and 3. So obviously he's gone nuclear, and as has Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton's played really well in softer matchups, and then they've just been on a 5-game stretch of the toughest defense in the league. So that's the way I look at it. This is another nuclear spot for Kamara. I'm watching what's happening because I can't answer the question. I don't know yet. But if he comes in if he comes in 15 to 20, I don't even know if I consider that chalky enough for his outlook.
Yeah, I think I think with everything you said, I think I'm probably off on the ownership projection. I probably have to bump him way up. But again, I mean, we're already projecting running backs for pretty high cumulative ownership. There's only so much running back ownership to go around. And then if Ramondre plays, I assume people are just going to lock him in against the Raiders defense because the Raiders are horrible. So I'll have to see how that plays out by Saturday morning. If I do bump up to Kamara to 25 or 30, we're going to have some crazy values in GPPs that are priced around him. Miles Sanders is going to smash. Staying in the New Orleans game, I talked about a lot of punt options this week, but one that probably won't be played as much as the other ones for New Orleans.
So my worst suggestion this week is going to be Rashid Shaheed, and I don't know if you had him in your DFS values for DraftKings.
I didn't touch this game.
Okay, because I've been struggling for values. And I knew Elijah Moore was going to get steam. We're definitely going to lose some of Elijah Moore, even though he's still fine at 3,600. But I kept looking around him thinking, is there even a piece around here? And genuinely, I think Rashid Shaheed for the Saints is a piece because before the Saints went on bye, remember, they then put Shaheed in the lineup for the second most routes in the team. And now we've seen his snaps, routes run, and target share increase in 3 consecutive games. And that's for a player who only ran 2 fewer routes than Chris Olave before the bye, who was averaging over 18 yards per catch. It's like a walking explosive. And then you look and see, okay, well, the Falcons' pass defense has been better recently, but that's not it at all. They've just literally played Kenny Pickett, Taylor Heineke, Justin Fields through the air, and PJ Walker. You go back before that, DJ Moore in his first game against them had 150 and a touchdown. Jamar Chase and Tyler Boyd both went over 130 and a touchdown each. Even Jimmy Garoppolo reached 296 with 2 touchdowns. Mike Evans 4 for 81. They were getting blown up when they played fine competition. And I think Andy Dalton is fine competition, honestly, in this game. So, yeah, whether it's a pivot from Elijah Moore or just a straight salary saver, I like Shaheed quite a bit this week.
Yeah, I mean, going back to all the salary savers at wide receiver, when I said that up top, I didn't realize that we had added Jacoby to the projections. With him in the projections, it knocks down Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne, who are really popping as cheap values. But we still have Shaheed, like you mentioned, and this is like DK. People you just rarely have to pay all the way down on FanDuel. You can fit mid-range guys, but on DK, like you said, Elijah Moore will still get some pop just because. Coming off 10 targets, playing against Detroit, Zach Wilson's it'll keep him from being mega chalk. People still play Elijah Moore.
You also, sorry to cut you off, but yeah, the same reasoning you have for Mac Jones, that kind of goes in line with Zach Wilson as well, who's just at the bottom of quarterback pricing, where Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson pop in the projections. And now, even if you look at the redraft streets, how much people are panicking, and rightfully so. Zach Wilson's bad. Garrett Wilson was a top 15 receiver in fantasy in 2 of his last 3 games with Zach Wilson. He only went over 70 yards in 2 of those 7 games, the last 7 games he played with Wilson. But even then, he did show he has a ceiling, even if it's at even it's at less odds than with Mike White. So that's just some food for thought for that game.
Yeah, absolutely. And another pay down guy that will definitely be popular that we haven't talked about yet is Chris Moore, who is a guy that I'm going to suggest probably the biggest pay down cash game lock of the week. 6,000 on FanDuel, 4,200 on DK against the Chiefs. I don't think it matters who starts at quarterback just because they're going to have to throw as 14-point underdogs. We saw Chris Moore with a 45.8% target share last week, which was the second highest in the league, turned 11 targets into 10 for 124. Nico Collins and Brandon Cooks still out. As big underdogs, we would assume that they have a pass-heavy game script. That wasn't the case last week as big underdogs. They just almost took it to Dallas and almost won that game. So it was a borderline shootout. But I don't think that probably happens with the Chiefs. But Chris Moore should still get his. But he might get very, very popular.
I don't think I care. Remember, the reason we said don't play Dulcich last week, awful play at 30%. And play Jerry Jeudy instead wasn't just for contrarian purposes. It's because the Chiefs have been so bad against wide receivers. And now it's the same spot. And you mentioned the 40% target share. It wasn't just that, though. He was literally Devontae Adams of the Texans. Like 58% of the team's receiving yards and 56% of their air yards in that game, too. Yeah. He also saw their only red zone target in the entire game. Like, the dude got everything. And so it's the same spot as last week that Jerry Jeudy went nuclear for 3 touchdowns. I don't think I'd care about his ownership, honestly, at 4,200. I think he's like the best play on the slate.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. If he, again, like I don't have crazy high ownership on anybody. So if we get Chris Moore at, I don't know, 20%, I think that's okay.
I would suck it. I would suck it up in a heartbeat in an instant. Yeah. Every bit of usage was too good.
Let's go back to that Titans and Chargers game. And this is actually one of my favorite plays. I wrote up this play and got into it a little bit as one of my favorite plays of the week in my article this week.
And it's because the Titans, of course, as we've seen with Jalen Hurts and Trevor Lawrence, everyone knows you can't run on them. That's why they're facing a league-high 40 pass attempts per game. And Justin Herbert himself averaging 43 pass attempts per game. We're going to get the ball through the air here. And more importantly, you look at last week, Mike Williams goes over 100 yards, but just an 11% target share, and more importantly, 65% of the snaps, which was his season low for a healthy game because he was brought in and actually being a limited player last week. We think that's going to increase considering before injury, he was playing 90% of the snaps as a full-time player. And so if that is the case, then absolutely. We want Mike Williams at full health in this spot to a Titans defense, allowing the league highs and yards per target and yards per coverage snap to opposing boundary receivers where he plays.
Yeah, last week was weird. We saw Gerald Everett and Josh Palmer combined for a 30% snap share. That's not something that's going to happen every week. And as we mentioned with Eckler in the underdog segment, that this pass funnel is one that we can really attack, and not just attack, but specifically attack on the perimeter, which obviously favors Mike.
Like him a lot. Even if it's skinny stacks with Henry, skinny stacks with Chig Okonkwo. I just like Mike Williams the best among him and Keenan Allen.
Yeah, I like the Mike Williams, Derrick Henry skinny a lot. You talked about Dak already. As I mentioned, like with some of these pay down wide receivers, I think you probably are going to be able to get to a stud wide receiver even in your cash game builds, which isn't always the case on DraftKings. CeeDee Lamb's actually a better FanDuel value this week according to 4-4 projections than a DK value, but still a good value on both sites. 8,100 FanDuel, 7,300 DK. You touched on every reason you like Dak, which is basically everything that I'm going to reiterate here. But as far as the game environment goes, like we talked about, if one shoots out, it's going to be this one. There's 3 games on the slate with a total of at least 48 points, but this is the only one where the spread is below a touchdown. We have 9 and 14 on the other ones. This is the only matchup on the main slate where the two offenses are top 10 in neutral pace over the last 6 weeks. That obviously helps us out with potential shootouts. Jacksonville bottom 3 in schedule adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends. So bad against the pass. And teams are throwing at the 3rd highest rate over expectation against the Jaguars over the last 6 weeks. CD, still the alpha there. I like Dak a lot. Like you said, I like CD a lot. I think there's lots of ways to stack this game, but CD is cheap enough compared to the super expensive guys like Devontae that you should be able to fit him into cash, and my favorite player in that range by far.
And I have another suggestion as well. because I do like CeeDee Lamb, but the Dak double stacks are very clearly CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz. Like last night, where I know people were, for whatever reason, worried about George Kittle even though he was playing Seattle, which also, remember, you never get the victory lap tight ends against Seattle. I saw a lot of that encroachment. You're not allowed to do it. And in this case, you're not allowed to do a victory lap if Dalton Schultz goes nuts, since the Jaguars are allowing the most yards per target and yards per snap to opposing tight ends, also third in yards per game to the position. It just makes so much sense. Even since Dak Prescott, since he returned from injury, Dalton Schultz leads the team with 7 end zone targets. Michael Gallup, the next closest, with only 2. So seems to be going one direction inside the red zone. If we think Dallas hits their ceiling outcome, then Dalton Schultz will absolutely be a part of it in this game.
Yeah, other than Dalton Schultz, it is really a Travis Kelce or bust week. It's
thin slate.
It's a really thin slate. On the Schultz is like the only viable play in the 4K range. Maybe like the only like guy we're even like projecting for reasonable I guess Cole Kmet too. He's 4K, but everyone else is like 3,500 or below, 3,600 or below. So I mean, when we have these huge gaps in projection and a player that's absolutely lapping the field, like the closest thing we usually see to this is like when Josh Allen and the Bills have like a mega point projection. We'll see Josh Allen just like with a crazy high projection compared to the field. And even if he is popular, we still play him just because the delta between the projection and the value scores is so high. And that's the case this week with Travis Kelce. $8,000 FanDuel, 7,800 DraftKings. It's usually really hard to get Kelce into your lineups. You have to make some pretty, you have to make some pretty big sacrifices to do it. But this week it's relatively easy because there are some values that I think are really viable. Chiefs, the highest team total on the slate, 31.75. Houston, they profile as a run funnel if we look at season-long numbers, but over the last 6 weeks, they're 20th in pass EPA per play allowed, 22nd in explosive pass rate. I mentioned flat ownership across the board. A cheap tight end isn't going to get steam. Like Dulcich has been the flavor of the month, but with the backup quarterback, he won't get steam. So Kelce maybe ends up at 22%, but I mean, if we're playing 25% Justin Jefferson's, 20% Devontae's, I'm playing 22% Kelce at this spot.
And again, I like Schultz on DraftKings and FanDuel. He's in that middle league salary range where like he has to hit his ceiling, but I do think everything shows up to where it can be a ceiling week for him.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the defenses really quick. There's actually a lot of good defensive plays this week.
There are a ton of good defenses. Yeah.
You are on the side that people aren't going to be on in this game that you're talking about.
The Jets defense is one I wanted from the very beginning, whether Mike White was in or not, because this is an awful matchup for Jared Goff. The Lions' first road game since November 20th, first of all, as they've benefited from not only soft matchups, but 3 consecutive matchups at home as well. And Jared Goff, we know outdoors, we know cold weather, we know he's always performed poor, but even more than that, I look at the fact that he's played 2 matchups against Robert Saleh defenses when he was back with the Rams, and those were literally the 2 worst performances of his entire career. 78 yards and 178 yards, no touchdowns, 3 picks across both games. This is a Jets defense that is not only one of the best in the league, but has controlled Josh Allen with consistency in both of those matchups. And now it's Jared Goff like outdoors against them. There's no chance here. No chance. So, I have Jared Goff in redraft ranked outside the top 12 with ease. And I think the Jets defense is the best play here.
Yeah, that's a really good dig on Saleh. And then with that play is probably going to provide some leverage because with Mike White starting, I think people will just click Lions because I think they'll want to play against Mike White just because there's so much talk about him, even though Lions defense isn't good. But the cash game obvious play this week is the Broncos defense, 3,700 FanDuel, 2,700 DK. I said ownership's going to be really flat across the board. I didn't think about defense. I still have like a kind of moderate projection on the Broncos. I think that I have them at 27% on DK, which is really high for a defense, but I think I'm going to bump them up even higher into the 30s, maybe even high 30s. They got the Monday special with the salaries coming out and with Kyler tearing his ACL. So that's what's going on here with Colt McCoy, and everybody's just going to play the Broncos. Just play them in cash. Don't even think otherwise. And on tournaments, I mean, you know what our take is on this, but I've been burned by it multiple times, but I'll keep dying on it.
That game is offensive to football. Maybe no Marquise Brown in it either. Colt McCoy and Brett Rippon, like both team totals are under 18 points. Like that game is offensive. And even then, honestly, if you don't play Broncos defense, like James Conner's getting enough touches where he's going to be overlooked at his salary. Like he might actually be a good DFS play.
Like with everybody hating so hard on Russ this year, and with how bad Arizona's pass defense has been lately, like are we just gonna see a Brett Rippon 303 game just for the narrative, so people could just be more mad at Russ this year? Like the universe is just gonna manifest it for us.
I got upset whenever they had those 3 scoring drives in a row last week. I was like, where the hell was this all year long? And then again, it ended. It was only 3 possessions, and that was it. It was to the Broncos after that.
Yeah, man. That game is, as you said, offensive to football. So no, I'm not going to play Brett Rippon, but it'll be funny if that did happen. If you guys want to get our final thoughts on the slate leading up to kickoff, hop in the 4for4 Discord on Sunday morning at 10:45 Eastern time. As I mentioned, the DFS price is down to $24. Or if you don't want to pay $24, you can go to 4for4.com/underdog and sign up for a new Underdog account. That'll get you a free DFS sub with your deposit, and you'll get a 100% deposit match up to $100. I'm disappointed that we didn't get the Chris Allen cameo in the Chris Allen corner, but the Midwest stays representing 4for4 over there. So have fun at the poker night over there. Maybe we'll get a Chris Allen pop in another time. If you are watching on the YouTubes, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. If you're listening, please give us a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast platform, and follow us on Twitter. Daigle is at not J Daigle. I'm at TJ Hernandez. 4for4 is at 4for4 football. Talk to you guys next week.